Okay, morning, Zan.
Good morning.
I have a classic and yet timely episode to bring you today in the podcast. And this is a question that we've always had since the beginning of our work, but it seems the urgency of the question seems to have strengthened significantly over the last handful of years
Mm.
as more media attention has gone towards this theme. And I've just started work with a group of men, and this is a very hot issue for some of them. And it's the classic question of overcoming the fear of being creepy or being called or accused of being a creep, or the kind of sister question, how do I become sexual or escalate things without being creepy or being perceived as creepy? So this whole concept of creepiness, which we'll flesh out here, um, lingers as a significant and growing barrier in men's minds. So where
So it
would you
wasn't
start
there,
with this?
that presumes then that it wasn't there so strong in previous times.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that since over the last 10 years, particularly since Me Too, and particularly since an intensified um, media scrutiny on the subject, men trespassing, crossing boundaries,
Yeah,
what are boundaries? What have certain men done around the world? Many countries have got like a landmark case of a man doing something and that creating a national furore and a national redefinition of what is right and what is a subtle nuisance actually to women. Um, this has created, I think, a lot of ambiguity in men's minds because the boundaries have shifted, and the
that's right.
cost, the very real cost of doing something that you think is innocent but turns out to be an infraction and you didn't know, can actually be expensive, as in career ending,
Yeah, yeah,
bankrupting, and worse. So the on the high end, the stakes are very real for this, and then on the low end, there has always been in men the sense of, oh, I just don't want to be called a creep. I want to be preferred by women or be included with women. I don't want to be outed or ousted or have a social label that follows me around. Right? And that's something
yeah.
more that's always been there.
If you talk to certain groups of people, I think that they would strongly say that the entire history of man-woman relationships has been offside, in that men have been getting away with stuff forever that in 2025 they would not get away with in all cultures. And so men have always been leaning a little bit into, I don't know, chauvinistic or more aggressive behavior. Oh, sorry, my phone. Turn the ringer off. Sorry, guys. And so it's corrected today, or it's overcorrected today, or it's adjusted today somehow. In other words, we've learned something in this modern age, that behavior. Well, we've always known it, but we've done something about that behavior, which is men um, date raping women, for instance. It's been going on for centuries, right? Where the woman's like, "Well, yeah, 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 yeah," and last minute, well, I'm not so sure, you know. Um, and 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that was just her being resistant, I guess. So are we enlightened now to the point, or do we need more enlightening, or is something gone offside and imbalanced? And that's men because of shifting landscape. Men today really don't know how they're supposed to approach things, and there's a counterforce saying that we've gone too far with the Gillette commercial where the guy was trying to go say to a pretty girl walked past and he was going to go say hi to her, and his buddy says, "No, man, come on, that's creepy behavior," which is amusing. Um, so it's fraught with danger
Hmm.
in this modern age. You know, at the edge of the map, there be dragons. So, and I don't. society's really taken a major swing in all kinds of strong political and social ways. It's taken a major, real shift from 20, 30 years ago in all kinds of ways. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm also not saying it's all good.
Can
So I don't really know.
can you name some of the ways that you've seen it shifting your lifetime? Because that might be quite illustrative for a younger man who's grown up in this soup and he doesn't actually have a frame of reference for how it has been before.
Well, I think that there's a kind of a, and maybe it's just my interpretation of it, maybe it's wrong, but it feels like it's not as socially acceptable, for instance, to go walk up to a woman in a park and say, "Hey, what's your name?" As simple as that. That's been going on since Adam and Eve, you know.
Mm.
A man sees a girl and he walks up, gets up his courage and goes and says hi to her. And the woman, you know, in society of history and cultures, is not the forward one. In other words, it's not her role to be the forward one. So she drops the proverbial hanky, which indicates I'm open to being, approached. If you please pick up my hanky for me. And that seems like that's crashed. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like men are a little nervous to do that now, to go up and say hi to a girl, because it's unwanted attention, which is this new phrase we say.
Mm.
You know, it's and maybe it is unwanted attention, but men in the past never knew it was unwanted or wanted until they went and said hi. So I think I certainly think in the West that there's a little bit more reluctance to, and maybe because of the reliance on digital apps like Tinder, there's a reluctance to physically, in the analog space, go and walk up and talk to a girl. I think there's a resistance to that. And I don't know if women are happier or not happy for that.
Mm.
I'm not sure.
Perhaps someone will comment. I'd be curious to get the temperature and what people are feeling today. Certainly, I don't get the sense of unwanted attention. Sounds like a new thing to me. Like in the past, if you were out in public life, then you were kind of susceptible to the things that would happen in public life. Otherwise, you would stay in the house, right? So this whole thing of personal space, my personal space, and my rightful boundaries, and my sense of self, and my sense of feeling safe in the world. These are entirely new concepts that didn't have a label before. Maybe
100%.
we were a lot more unconscious actually about our boundaries and our traumas and what we needed to take care of. But there was a rough and tumble, hurly-burly, even though it was uncomfortable, life would cause itself to rub up against you with all the good and the bad consequences.
The other thing that's changed, and noticeably, is alcohol has always been social lubricant for men and for women. Women have always used it as kind of my excuse for what I really want. And now, man, that's a scary prospect, because you see the ads that they had in the UK a while ago. That was, it says Sam was drunk, Sally was drunk. Sam and Sally had sex. Sally didn't, the next day didn't agree with it, or something along this ilk. And so Sally was raped, needs some help. And they were both drunk, but I read something like, or I heard this somewhere, this consent, some group put out a consent, rules of consent. And it's so explicit that every minute of every interaction of the sexual interplay, she has to be excitedly a hell yes. And if she goes quiet, you got to back off, And so it's different than when I was young. And I'm not saying it's worse, but I'm also saying that, like, I've always been 100% free and clearly consent. I do not want last minute resistance, the old pickup artist thing, how to get past her last minute resistance, get her some wine or do some convincing. My whole philosophy is I want to dance, and I'm excited to dance, and I want her to be just as excited to be there. And so I've always checked in. Are you happy to be here? Are you excited? You want to do this in a fun way, as opposed to checking in, I was coaching a guy a while ago that that basically was telling me that I quit him as a client because he was kind of along the lines of saying that, well, pushing that old way of like just push through her last minute resistance. Like, and because here's what guys don't understand, and women understand this. Men go, they don't really get this. There's a lot of times that a woman on a date with you, or in your room, or in your watching TV, watching movies with you, having a glass of wine, will give in. Give in is the phrase, and have sex with you because it's easier than resisting you. It's easier than trying to bat you off, and also she doesn't want. There's a small part of her, or a large part of her, that's afraid of your frustration. Doesn't want to. So they give in just because it's easier than to deal with you and your anger and your sarcasm and your suspicion and pissed off. And they give in. And men don't know this. They think, yeah, they tell their buddies the next day, man, I was good, man. I had sex with her. She didn't really want to. But it was easier to give in to your ridiculousness.
So she panders to you as a child when she does this, and then builds up hostility and resistance on the back end. Like what I never got about last minute resistance is, sure, you can overcome it and get your kicks for one night, but if you backed off and just held a bit of space and created safety for her, and was just like, go home, come back, let's meet again and do this again, and she builds trust and safety, she'll come back into your life many, 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 many times. You overcome resistance on one night, then you'll have her for one night, and that's it. You'll not even have her. She won't be very open. She'll kind of tense up and wait for it to be over.
I've been my natural spirit is that, like, I want enthusiasm and fun. I want it to be fun for her, fun for me. So I've avoided all the kind of, like, I don't want to say the word forceful, but really convincing type of energy on a date, like really trying to talk her into it and try to get her to, and there's a whole dynamic there where women pretend that they're not interested and they want you to talk them in, let's go, like they show some balls here, like, but I think modern man today, for good reason, is afraid to try and push into that and say, try and find that. So women have lost that fun part of resisting, pretending to resist, and then giving in. They've lost that.
Yeah, because
fun part for them.
Men don't know how to step into that
you can't tell
unknown ground of, is she being coy and I should pursue and it's all in good faith, or if I do continue to pursue, is that actually unwanted? What I sense has happened is the kind of invisible, hard to pin down cultural force has drifted in a way, I think, through outrage, like genuinely important outrage, and also fear and fear-mongering. There has been a complete shifting in the agreed upon limits and lines of what is appropriate and what is okay as a cultural story. And in the midst of that, all we're left with is this nebulous kind of fear, and no one's come out and redefined this actually. And I think there are people in the space that are trying to redefine what is creepy, what is consensual, what is good. But there's nothing has been agreed upon. There's a few pockets of people with their own code of conduct that might be strongly defensive of women, or might be strongly offensive of men, for men. But most people don't have a definition. I think that's what makes it so tricky.
And it's you're right, Jordan. Like, and I didn't even know how to answer it for some guy. For them to say, how do I know if I'm pushing that boundary too much? Or I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. It's new to me too. It's a new landscape for everybody, and like I said, there's no definitions.
Yeah,
everyone's got a different viewpoint of it, and so everyone errs on the side of caution. So women are not getting approached. Women are not having fun with last minute resistance, and and men are just they're afraid of being labeled a creep, as you started this thing.
Yeah.
And it's very easy nowadays to get that label. Very, very easy.
So you said nobody knows, but yeah, if we see something play out before our eyes, we can generally feel what the creepiness or okayness or the desire for more is. And of course, women are not one perspective. This is like men's kind of logical fallacy number one. Women is not a kind of global population with one unified perspective. Within the world of women, they're a kind of hardline on this side and actually extremely permissive on the other. So I'm working with a group at the moment. We've got 11 men, and we're starting to untangle, because this is a group theme. Doesn't affect everybody, but some of the men in the group it affects very, very strongly. How to overcome the fear of being a creep. The first thing that I think we have to do to untangle the fear is define what creepiness is. And I asked the group, I said, who in here identifies as a creep, or can sometimes be creepy, or sometimes thinks creepy things, or sometimes even does something that might be a little bit creepy? And I've got quite an advanced group, advanced practitioners. So more than half of people put their hand up and said, yeah, I identify as a bit of a creep. And then 3 or 4 of them were staunchly, no, I'm not a creep. I'm not a creep. That's not me, right? So some people will identify, some people radically disidentify men. But then that begs the question, what does it mean, actually? How are you defining creep? And I think perhaps a useful lens here, well, maybe we'll stop to the viewer. If this is a theme that brings up a lot of unknown and fear to you, how do you define it? What does it even mean? Might be worth looking at your own definition, which is semi-conscious or even unconscious, and getting clear. I think a useful framework comes from Eric Byrne. If you ever heard of Games People Play, that's his famous contribution. It's a great book about unconscious social games that people play with each other. And in his book, he talks a lot about men and women. And so because we are not authentic or not raised really to be authentic about what we desire and what we need, rather than just saying, hey, Zan, I would like this. Can you give this to me? And then being okay with your yes or your no. We will try and go in roundabout ways to get the thing that we want, right?
Yeah.
So it's difficult to go up to a woman and say, wow, I find you really beautiful. I would like to invite you for a drink. And then if she says yes or no, it's like complete grace to whatever she chooses. This is, if we were all perfect, authentic robots walking around, like there was no fear or human programming in the way we would operate in this clarity, respectful clarity of intent. But we don't. So Eric Byrne will make the distinction that there are first, second, and third degree games. And I think we can say there are first, second, and third degree creeps as a definition, as a point of definition. So first degree creeping would be something like Friday night, and I'm sat here with my beer. There's a really beautiful girl over there, and she's wearing a low-cut top. And I kind of like to peer over. And I return to my beer and my friends. And I peer over again, kind of want to catch a glance. And just keep peering over. Now, ideally, I would turn to her and engage her in a conversation. And at some point, a compliment or a declaration of, wow, I rather enjoy, I find you beautiful, I'm attracted to you. You would say that, but instead you don't. You just constantly peer over. So first degree games are what are known as genuinely or generally kind of harmless ways of seeking attention or gaining attention from other people.
Okay.
So it's like a woman would say to you, Zan, I'd love to have another drink. I kind of run out of money, and what I do have left, I would have to get a taxi home. So she kind of makes up this little story. And the more she makes up a story, she's just waiting for you to say, okay, I'll buy you another drink, or I'll give you the taxi fare home, right? But she doesn't want to ask directly, so she'll make up a little story. And the guy in the bar is like leering over, looking, and then he'll look away. Like he doesn't want to be caught looking, so he'll look away. So it's semi-innocuous, but there is a bit, the start of the creepy vibe is there, which is I caught you staring, But when I look at you to challenge you, hey, buddy, are you staring at me? You will pretend like you're not staring. It's actually peekaboo, right?
Yeah.
So she might say, well, he's a creep. He's been staring at me and he's not looking over. One of our guys actually said, yeah, thinking about it, I'm not sure if I'm creepy, but I'm just clunky, actually. Or I'm not creepy, but I'm hesitant. And because I'm hesitant, I register that sometimes that comes across as a little bit creepy. I'd rather not be hesitant, but I feel hesitation, and therefore I've never really creeped a girl out. No one's ever called me a creep, but I just get the sense that I send a creepy vibe because I'm indirect about something, and it's usually my gaze or I'm stealing a glimpse.
So if he were to actually act on it and walk over and say hi, that negates the creepy factor?
Yeah, and it seems to me that most men realize that there is a time scale. Like, oh, if I'm looking at her a few times, then I have to approach after a few glimpses. If I leave it for an hour, my creepiness meter has gone up into the deep red, and I'm almost exploding. You can't sit on a bar for an hour and a half and keep glancing at a girl and do nothing. You end up in uh, God, he must be a rapist or a serial killer or something like that territory, because you're glancing over. And typically, where a man feels desire, but also shame, and also fear, and also hesitation, the gaze takes a hardened look, right? The subcommunication he gives off is like, it becomes a glare rather than a gaze, and rather than the playful delight that you would get if you were kind of open and in flow, gets replaced with this stone-faced, intent to consume, and that starts to build up the defensiveness in her.
But it's not always that, because you could be genuinely attracted to the girl in the low-cut dress, and in the middle of a conversation with Jordan, and you look over, and there's a delight in your spirit, and there's a thankfulness in your spirit that there's a woman exists like that. And there's no intent to slobber all over her with your eyes. But you actually don't, but you still don't do an approach, right? You don't, I think it's, to me, I don't know what definition you came up with your men's group, but my definition would be uninvited, invading space, metaphorically, emotional space, physical space that is not welcome. So I'm always testing. So I look at the low cut dress girl, and when she catches my eye, I acknowledge her with my eyes. I say, I see you. No words, but I see you, and I like what I see. And then I'm looking for
that? Can you give a little bit more of an example so you guys can see?
If I'm sitting with you in a restaurant and I see a woman over there that's attractive to me, you can't stop that. I mean, that's just the way the world works, right? There's something about her that catches my eye. I will look at her, and if she glances over at me, I will acknowledge her from across the way. That's my subcommunicated opening, and I would just give her a nod or something like this and smile like a little boy. Like, I see you is what I'm saying. I see you, and I like what I see. And then I'm just only looking to see if that was received, if there's receptivity in that. If she smiles back, if she touches her neck, if she plays with her hair, if she whispers to her girlfriend, then I think that there's a reasonable chance if I went over there, like a 75% chance if I went over there, she'd be receptive to my saying, hello, I'm Zan.
Yep.
If she sees me kind of like flash my eyes at her, give her a little nod to her like this, and she looks away flatly, like uninterested, I would never approach her, because that would feel like I'm invading space. That's uninvited attention. The pickup artist world used to talk about this method or this technique of walking up to a table with girls sitting at it. Hey, girls, I got a question for you, blah, blah, blah. And then pull out a chair and sit yourself down. And to me, that would make me ill if I tried to do that. Just against my whole spirit. To sit down and to claim a place at their table without an invitation from them to do so is a violation of space as far as I'm concerned. I would never. And guys say, well, you have to be forced. You have to be man. You have to take what you want. Break off your piece. Yeah, whatever. So I'm very much checking constantly for. I don't like the word consent because it's loaded, but I'm checking constantly for receptivity, and and that my invitation is landing. So I don't necessarily agree. I like the guy who's shifty eyed that you're talking about. He could be just nervous, but not creepy. But really, just doesn't. He's looking at her in the low cut dress. She glanced over, and he got caught looking at her, and he's nervous, and so he just turns away. But he's not a creep.
Yeah.
So you got to make a distinction there.
Well, this is exactly the lines that we're looking to uncover. He's nervous, or he feels a bit of fear, or a bit of shame, or a bit of, oh my God, I've been caught, anticipation. And that kind of tangles him up a little bit. It's an uncomfortable feeling. It's not like delight and enjoyment and, telegraph with the banter of eyes from across the room, and that'd be a delightful thing. It triggers something inside of him, maybe a bit of insecurity. And what was nerves starts to become stalling or hesitation, and then fear, and then into that mix, I think there's the voice, which is, God, I feel afraid, and I'm afraid. What if I'm a creep? I'm creeping her out. I should have spoken to her already. Oh God, now I'm stuck again, and I'm always in this thing. What if she thinks I'm a creep? And then the word enters in, right? So it's I think a mesh of being triggered with challenging feelings and thoughts in this moment.
Totally. It's a whole bundle of complications and analytical thoughts and emotional ups and downs and historical things coming into your mind all in a few seconds. And so I think I really the creepy aspect to me would be that there's any kind of invasion of space, and could be staring at her from across the way, that is that has nothing to do with her. There's no grace, no generosity in that to her. It's like she's an object. She's something to stare at. She's something to leer at. She's something that, and there's no generosity of spirit in that. And I think we all know that the difference between a guy who's nervous and would really like to be sweet with her and have a nice date with her, which is a good guy, but he looks away, and a guy who's just is only thinking about himself, and no generosity or something, or gratitude in his. Like I have gratitude if I see a girl in a low top dress. I'm thinking, the world is good. God is in his heaven. I like it.
So to recap this early phase, you're in the bar, you're in the social engagement, you look over, and the first thing you're doing is you're looking around, but you're telegraphing and showing that you see her, and that you feel a sense of wonder and openness and delight and gratitude that she's there, and curiosity. I might like to meet you. But there's no intent to go over there yet, unless you've got this receptivity, or this is wanted attention. I like the fact that I'm being seen by this man in the hat and the glasses over there, and so on. Okay, so you're doing this checking of social codes, and if you do approach her, it's completely attuned to her invitation.
100%. Yeah, and I could be wrong, because I might read it wrong, but if I'm 75% sure, then I'll approach. But I might go over and she might say, not interested, thank you. And I tried. I didn't know.
Yeah,
I'm not 100. You don't nail it every time, but you don't beat yourself up either, because you did your best, sincere effort.
Yeah, and what you are doing in that is making sure that you are approaching when you get the invitation. But if you get a clear non-invitation, then you don't continue to invade a space either with your presence or with your eyes. You're not doing the stare or the glare. Which means that in the moment you are present enough. You're not tangled up with overthinking or your history of past defeats and your fears. So you have a lightness to you. Whereas one of the things that other men will have to grapple with is the sense of anxiety or the fear or the hesitation or the everything that brings up. Right? I mean, these are things that we work through in coaching.
But for certain.
But it's such a significant moment, because if you get tangled up here, you can, the fear of being a creep comes in. But if you have both a, you know how to signal in socially acceptable subcommunication from a distance, and you can keep yourself somehow feeling light, You avoid going into the kind of creep bucket or doing anything creepy.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we teach in our Ars Amrata courses, in our essentials course and our membership, all the things you're doing, so that guys can get that understanding. I mean, women, I wrote in the Alabaster Girl that every woman knows the effect she has on a room. I mean, there's no accident here, like there's a low cut dress for a reason. And, but if it isn't approached with your eyes or your smile or your conversation or whatever, with gratitude and respect and desire is a great thing. If it isn't doesn't have that, and you're, especially if you're drunk and spitting on her sort of thing, right? Then it's unwanted. It's uninvited. So I mean, this is the things that the nuances that men don't know and they need to learn. But you can learn it. I mean, it's easily learnable.
Can you speak to your understanding of what it's like for a woman to go out, given that she might spend anything up to 4, 5, 6 hours getting ready, and she'd become very conscious of the effect that she's having on the room. And she goes out, let's say, to a bar, and it's Friday night, and it's actually quite busy, and she's put a lot of thought, and she's wearing something, she's hot, she's wearing something revealing. And she goes into this room, and there's hope for attention, wanted attention, and I guess there is a displeasure of unwanted attention.
Yeah.
And she goes into a place, and there's lots of different kinds of attention, some of them which feel nice, and some of them don't feel nice. And she might hope for an attention that she's not getting, but then not want an attention she is getting. It when I put myself in that position, it feels like a very vulnerable, but like a carnival of chaotic intention and intent. God, there might be 200 men in this room, and what are they going to do? And am I going to attract the attention of the right one that I want to attract the attention of? Like, what's your sense of what it's like for a woman to walk into a room like this and be stared at by all the men present?
There's another layer that's not talked about very often, is that she's wearing that low-cut dress potentially for attention that's desirable by her from men, but she's also wearing that low-cut dress because of women. Women dress for other women. If a woman's going to go to a party and she knows that she's the only woman there, it's all guys, she might go in sweatpants and her hair up. If there's women there, now I got to dress up, put all my makeup on. So, I mean, that's another layer. But what is it like for her? If she's attracted to the guy in whatever fundamental sense, then his looking at her is okay. If he's not a good looking guy to her or something, or good energy guy, that's why I say that all of your actions and interactions and your eye contact, we should be imbued with gratitude and kindness and respect and fun and mischief, because that will be felt as an energetic field from you. And here's an interesting little anecdote. Every woman, even that walks through a crowd of with men that are kind of like obliquely looking at her, afraid to actually, but she knows she's got eyes in the back of her head. She knows that the guys are staring at her body as she walks by, even though they don't do it in front of her face. She knows. And women have this quality where they will subconsciously adjust themselves when they walk in through a room where eyes are on them. They'll straighten up a little bit. They'll suck it in a little bit. They'll stick out their boobs a little bit, and just slightly. They just rearrange themselves because they know they can feel that there's an energetic presence of eyes upon them. And it's just a natural thing. And here's a little anecdote. I had this gay friend in Montreal years ago, good buddy of mine. And he had said this, you know what? He said, I can always tell when a guy's gay, because if a woman walks through a crowd of men and the eyes are on her, she subconsciously will adjust and, tweak herself a little bit. If a guy has no gay tendencies or curiosity of any kind at all, he walks through a crowd of men, and some of the men are checking him out. He's oblivious to it. He's just his belly's hanging out and whatever, right? But if he feels eyes on him like women do from men, they will subconsciously adjust, and they don't even know they're doing it. I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
They'll adjust themselves because men's eyes are on them, and they have, you know. He said, I can always tell if somebody's like closeted gay because they adjust themselves in the presence of other men, slightly, subconsciously. I don't know if it's true or not, but he laughed and told me this in Montreal years ago.
So
I think it's funny.
here's a really loaded question, obviously, because there are so many different types of women and preferences and experiences with this whole thing. But in a world where it seems like male attention is unwanted, and there's messaging that says male attention is unwanted, do women want male attention?
Yeah, that's a loaded question because they do, but they don't. Like they're pissed off if you're staring at them, and pissed off if you don't. You know? That's the truth of it. She'll resent you if you're staring at her, and she'll resent you if you don't stare at her.
Yeah. So you're either a gay or a creep, basically. we don't. There's a very very extremely thin razor's edge that we've got to walk along.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, have you come across a lot of the theory about male and female gaze, particularly when it comes to cinema?
No, I've heard the phrase, but I'm not sure what it's comprised of.
I think there's some interesting things in here.
Male is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the history of cinema, it's been 99% male directors, like forever. You know, there's been a few female directors, a very small handful forever. But in the last 15, 25 years or so, more and more women are directing. And now we're approaching an age where there's more and more something approaching a parity. And you see a difference in directorial styles, which is the man is operating the camera through a male gaze. It just makes sense to me. This is the way I see the world. I make a film that represents the way I see the world. And a woman takes up the camera and she will direct a film in a way that makes sense according to how she sees the world, right? So I think some of the criticism of male and female gaze is a bit off. You know, it sticks men in a box over here and sticks women in a box over here as if one is not capable of the other way of seeing, or that all men are kind of one style, which is incorrect. But typically, some things that men will do from the male gaze this is really cheesy, but you know, like let's say a hot siren female character comes into the film, and the first glimpse you get of her is the high heels walking up some steps. and the second thing is like a midriff with some hips or some breasts. And after 5 or 6 of these little clips, you'll finally get the full figure in one frame. So the hot woman has been introduced to you as a collage of separate body parts, and you only behold her as an actual person like minutes later. And particularly you see this if you've got like the horny teenage kind of American Pie type thing going on. Typically, anytime a new female character comes into the film, this is the way they film a new female character, because the horny teenage boy is only capable of gazing upon a woman as, oh my God, you know, she exists first as a pair of breasts, second as a pair of legs, third as a hips and a waist. And then moments later, or, you know, maybe even never, there is something like a personality or a soul or a human in the full body, right?
That's cool. Never thought of that.
Yeah. And then from the female gaze, it's completely different, which is they will use the way that they introduce a female character. The camera will linger on her in a different way. And it's virtually always the full essence of the character in her totality will be revealed at the same time. And the camera will linger at her in a kind of a generous way that is, you know, foregrounding the humanity and the emotional aspect. But the male gaze, as they say, will be foregrounding the physical form and the separation of different body parts.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That makes sense.
So, I mean, I think this theory falls down when you get a great male director who depicts women in a deeper humanity than even most female directors will. But most of the time there is this interesting separation, and I think it just reflects, you know, how do we gaze upon a woman? I think this is the gift in this topic for us to look at. How do we gaze upon a woman? Is it are you in your reptilian brain? Do you just go for the body parts? And I think if you're doing this first degree creepy thing, just gazing over, are you looking at a woman, or are you looking at a pair of boobs, or are you looking at an ass? And a lot of men are like, well, kind of naturally, I know that I'm just ogling the body part and not the person. And this is, I think it's both instinct and biology. I think it's also psychology, which is, there's something, you haven't quite integrated the notion of a female body, an alluring female body, and the subjective female person. They don't quite exist together in unity in your own psyche. And that's revealed through your gaze.
And you said that that's instinct based. And can you take that horny teenager and re-engineer that in him?
Yeah.
You can, by education, by social awareness, like by trying to, how do you get him to not be drawn to the boobs first? How do you do that when it's innate?
Yeah.
In the male psyche, right? How do you re-engineer that in a young man, for instance, right? So that they now see the whole spectrum of her, first and foremost, which is the female gaze. How do you re-engineer it, or can you?
Yes, you can. I mean, as an immediate answer, I've got two levels. So one level is simple life experience. So let's say I've never been with a hot woman.
Right.
I've never had a stunning hot female body in my hands available to me that I can do anything I want with. I don't know what that experience is like. Once I've had that experience once or twice, it's quite amazing, because you realize, oh my God, there's a person here. I'm talking to her. She's either kind or she's unkind, as you said in a former podcast. She's emotional. She relates to me. There's a conversation here.
Yeah.
That, it's an initiation for a young man actually to have in his hands an object of desire, and then to realize that object is a subject. So I think when you have real intimacy with women across multiple years, you start to realize how the humanity goes deeper and deeper, and men will be like, God, I really wanted that woman. Now I'm with her. Now I actually realize who she is a little bit more, and that changes the way that I see everything. So it's kind of initiation of growing up and intimacy to learn that another person is like that. And ideally you'll get to a stage years down the line where it's like, yeah, I see the hot body, but I also get a feel for her personality and who she is, all at once. That's a sign of maturity. Now, can I impart that in the short term? Yes. I'm working actually right now on a psychological process that has to do with sexual fantasies.
Okay.
And what's interesting is, if you really root into someone's kind of erotic images, and most people have one or two core erotic images in a deep place in their psyche. And as an exercise, if you're to write down what is the fantasy you always go back to, if you have a limited amount of time and you really want to get some pleasure or release, like what image or story will you generate in your mind in order to move sexual energy through your body, right? Most men have a primary, and then maybe a secondary fantasy that they'll come back to again and again as a variation. And it's the same with porn. So some men don't have this imagination on hand, but they do browse porn, right? So what happens when a man is actually browsing porn? Well, one of the things is, often he won't be watching the videos from start to finish. He will actually spend more time browsing the homepage, trying to click on the thumbnail that is most alluring. This is actually a really important activity. The psyche here is extremely active and involved. It's looking for something. It's not this passive browsing. It's really looking for something. What is it looking for? I believe that most men are surfing porn because the psyche is looking for a particular image that kicks his libido off in a very robust way. And 99.9% of videos online are not going to do that for you. Or if they come close, they're a little bit of a miss. But every now and then you'll find a video that's like, whether it's the actress or the setting or the the setup, the acting, or it happens in a school or whatever it is. Yeah. or the words that get said, or the power play. There's something in all of that that's like, oh my God, this just fires up. And if you want a humongous orgasm, that seems to be aligned with finding the right video. And if you get the wrong video, it's like, I don't want to jack off to this. Really, it's not what I'm looking for. So another route in is to look at what, let's say you're going to quit porn tomorrow, but you're allowed to take 1 or 2 videos with you as keepsake from your years of this habit. Most men will remember 1 or 2 or 3 videos of having given him a real pleasurable peak, like of having ignited something so deep within his libido. It's like, that's more than every other video put together that has a sense of meaning for me. Why does the video have a sense of meaning? Because it maps on to the deep fantasy or a deep image that's in the psyche. So I do some work in with some of my clients. I mean, you've got to be ready for this because it's a bit of a brave exploration, and you've got to be beyond your surface vulnerability or shame, around this whole topic. But once you look at what the actual fantasy is, within that, you've got the sense of how the man sees women, how the man sees himself in relationship to women. Does he project on women a sense of you're kind of a small thing that I want to consume so that I become godly? Or does he project, God, you're so amazing that you're such a goddess that I'm insignificant, and if I just get wrapped up in you, then that's something? You get the sense of, in his deepest image, this is not just in the surface mind, but in the deep image, is she someone with a personality, or is it just a body type, right? Is it an objective fetish? The big boobs, the foot fetish, the 7-foot Amazonian. So you get to see in a deep psychological way, like, what is his bare bones image of a woman that is erotic to him? And the more you start to understand this and unpack it and unfold it, the more you can realize, okay, when you're having this fantasy, do you feel your heart? When you're having this fantasy, what part of your own self are you suppressing? What's your image of yourself when you have a fantasy? And typically we've got some very bare bones and how do you say, our erotic maturity is stagnated at 12 or 14 or 16 years old when we first encountered these images. So you might be a 60-year-old man, but in your own mind, when you get aroused, you're still going back to Marilyn Monroe or Pamela Anderson or something like that, and being a 16-year-old boy and waiting for her to come in and pull you by the hand, and you're helpless and hopeless, and that's what gets you off. So you can go into the psyche, and the more you understand what's in there, the more you're like, God, this desire is also filled with vulnerability. It's filled with need. It's filled with a desire for appreciation or nourishment. It's filled with my own desire to have power or vengeance. And it's only when you own that stuff, actually, God, and this is the thing, it was Oscar Wilde who said something like, everything in life is about sex, apart from sex, which is about power.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the last minute resistance you talked about earlier. These guys who want to overcome last minute resistance, they don't do that because they want to have sex. Sex is bad and they're not interested in it. They overcome last minute resistance because they want to feel power. And what's meaningful for them in that is going home and having the stripe or a notch on the bedpost, or the sense of, I could do it. Whether they announce it to the group or they hold that internally, it's, I could do it. I slept with a girl. Look at me. It's completely about power. It's nothing to do with sex.
Right.
But coming back into, coming back into these fantasies, usually it's an emotional thing that we're actually looking to get met. We want to feel a woman so big that she blows us away and makes us tiny. We want to feel ourselves so huge that we can do anything in the world. This is the emotional thing that we're looking for beneath all of our sexuality. If you uncover that and own it, all of a sudden you have a space where you can kind of mature, let's say, your erotic psyche. And I think that this changes everything about the gaze you put out to women, because no longer are you, in your psyche. You're in the bar on a Friday night drinking a pint of beer. You're a 45-year-old male. But you look over at that pair of boobs and you're like, God, I never got enough of that when I was 3 years old. If only I end this Friday night and I could just be awash within this bliss, that there's still the child. So when she looks at you, checking her out, not checking her out, is he a creep? Is he interested? He's kind of looking at me. Well, your own psychology is full of these different unknown gradations of maturity.
That's right.
This is how I would say it. So yeah, so your question is, can you integrate that without going through 15 years of actual intimate relationships? If you're brave enough, yeah, I mean, we could go on a psychological process, understand this, bring consciousness to it. You're going to go through a ton of shame, but it frees up the space that you have inside of you. And the reason you look over at a woman and there's pleasure and delight, lightness and delight, is because you don't have, or you've overcome all of the stuck psychologies along the way.
Yes.
So that once you overcome that, the gaze naturally becomes more full. You see a woman as a woman, you see, not as your object relation.
Yeah. So that's the psychology of the creep. Then is that she's a summation as opposed to body parts explored first in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
And I think, to some degree, we've got to own at the bottom of this. I think there is a spiritual dynamic. You talk about this ancient dynamic of male and female. I think there is a spiritual dynamic that we've really got to own and learn to enjoy, which is we like to look. The male in us, the male consciousness, loves to look. We love to look at things. We love to look and behold and feel wonder. And the female loves to be looked at and to be seen and to be wondered and to be the subject of wonder and enthusiasm. And right at the bottom of this, there's something really sacred between viewer and viewed, looker and looked upon, which somehow we have to resurrect in our culture. The reason we have supermodels walking down the stage and that has such a light to it, or even, let's say, the high level artful stripping. And there's a lot of women that I know that go to pole dancing or heels dancing or even stripping. There's a sacred element actually to revealing and turning this into a magical alchemical act of and bearing all to be seen. And the male in this regard is actually transfixed. It's not physically erotic, actually. He looks and it's visually spellbinding, and a moment where the mind gets to turn off for the first time. This is why it's relaxing. In the best of occasions, it's relaxing to go to a strip club because the mind can turn off. You behold something really beautiful. You're left there in a stasis. This is a sense of spiritual wonder.
Right.
And this is a missing conversation at the center of it all. And if we could say, like, yeah, I'm a man, I love to look. Sometimes I'd look a little too long and it goes into the realm of creepy. Prefer not to do that. But at the core of it, I like to look, and that's a fundamental goodness. And at the core of everything, you get dressed up and you wear these clothes and you walk in this way and these heels and so on because you love to be seen. Now, unfortunately, the quality of the lookers in the world of men is often a little bit polluted with our own pornified and immature society when it comes to eros. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of these gays are a little polluted and a little skewed with people's own desires and attachments and desire to possess and so on. But in the purity of it, it's really sacred to behold and to be beheld.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
I think as we start to own this, we can untangle if we allow ourselves to look, we can untangle the sense of being creepy, but also we need a sense of humor. Oh yeah, sometimes I can be a little creepy. I gaze too much and I wanted to look a bit more than was normal. But there's an innocence actually.
Absolutely.
So if I say I'm not a creep, I would never do a thing like that. Then I'm just building up actually a sense of ego that's going to be knocked down later on when I do the creepy thing, and it's going to hurt. But if I say actually, there's a little boy in me that still wants to look. What's that movie? All the boys are looking. Malena. Yeah. So all the Italian boys in a coastal town, they're looking at this just gorgeous, perfect fruition of an adult woman with all her curves and femininity. She walks into town every day. All the men look at her. And the boys, the 8-year-old boys are all looking at her spellbound as well.
Yes.
And there's a sense that we all had, I think, when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, that we would see a full woman in her beauty and just be like, it's immense delight just in looking. Yeah.
Immense delight.
So there's in the midst of every creep, we might even say that there is a primordial innocence. And can you feel that?
That's what I was trying to say at the beginning. It's like someone might just be nervous, but they really their desire is sincere, and their love of the spectacle and the moment that they're in is real. They just don't know how to handle it or emotionally deal with it, and so they shut it down. And it can be interpreted as creepy, but they're not creepy. They're good people. He's a good boy, good man. It's just they're drawn to something that they don't understand. It's out of their ken, kind of thing. It's really interesting. It's a really interesting conversation, actually. So the lesson for the listeners is replace all your videos in your folder about porn with videos in your folder, Suzanne and Jordan talking about porn. There you go.
You're allowed to save one or two. My homework is, when we work through this stuff, my homework is you're allowed to save one or two, but just take a few notes. What is the overall dynamic of what's happened in that video that triggers you so much? Like, rather than this passive, compulsive, getting lost in it, what if you were really aware? Because when I ask a full group of men, like, what's your favorite porn video of all time? Everyone will say something different. And most of the group, I'm like, what? That's a category I would never, ever, ever click on, like ever. And I'm like, you like this,
It's funny.
But obviously there's a sense of love to it. But it's amazing, actually, the diversity of how we get wired with these things.
And who knows why? Yeah, that's a whole new conversation with psychologists. Interesting.
I think it's worth quickly saying, I talked about Eric Byrne and 3 Degrees. I'll say this so briefly, but the second...
What's the name of the book?
Games People Play. Yeah, it's a
70s, right?
real classic. Yeah, early 70s.
I remember that from the 70s when I remember hearing about that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a foundational year training in TA, transactional analysis, which is a very deep, old school psychotherapeutic view. So when you said things on stage at the beginning, like, men and women play games. This is the end of games. We need a conversation that is authentic. That is the end of games. When I just heard you say that, I didn't just hear, "Oh, stop playing hard to get and speak the truth." I heard the end of the whole psychological covert way of trying to get needs met and met. So that had an extra profundity on me. But let's say being vaguely creepy in a bar is the first level game of creep. The second level would be, you kind of stalk her on Facebook and Instagram, and then start sending her messages, and then start asking her friends to do things and so on. So you take your creepiness out of the attentional realm and start to take it into the social realm. And it tends to hit a climax where, she will tell you to go away and that it's unpleasant and she doesn't want that anymore. You will allow the creepy, take the word out, creep, the cluster of desire that fueled the first stage of the game. You will allow that to start to manifest, and you'll start peeping at her and sending her stuff, or shaping your life to get more glimpses of her, and then you enter into a whole new world of intensity, and that's likely to have negative repercussions.
Right.
Exactly. And then the third stage creepiness is stuff like, third stage games usually end up in the hospital or in the court of law or in the morgue, right? So there's kind of creepiness that ends in murder. And one of our guys posted the story of a hotel clerk who installed a system of cameras in a hotel so that he could spy on a celebrity getting changed and then distribute the video online. So when I asked the guy, like, are you a creep? He was like, no, like, there's no way I'm ever going to do that. So when you say you're a creep, it's like,
the degrees.
Well, all the guys that are like, yeah, I look a little, I'm a bit clumsy with my eye contact in a bar. Sure, I'm a creep. That's first degree creep. But third degree creep is you're actually going to pursue a woman and put her in a state of danger because the desire has become so suffusing that it takes your behavior into wild lengths. So the work here is to find a sense of clarity and peace in the way that we do first stage creepiness, to see if we can bring a more enlightened way of bringing our attention across in a way that our attention feels like a gift. But once you hit that second stage, you know that something sours. You look through the peephole too long, and it's like, I wouldn't be able to look at this woman in the eyes anymore without lowering my head in shame, because we kind of know when we cross the threshold there.
Yeah, of course. Interesting conversation, Jordan. Okay.
By the way, if a woman calls you a creep, saying you're such a creep, how dare you look at me like that? How do you respond?
Oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever had that said to me. Maybe in jest. I don't think I've ever had a woman be offended by. I never offend women because I'm super careful how I approach things, and I'm the most sexual forward guy that I know. But I'm very, very gracious in it. I mean, it's a whole new subject. We could talk about it, but I can say something to a woman that's innuendo-ish, and there's no offense given or taken. And but there's also no doubt of what I'm saying. So I guess maybe because me trying to figure out the propriety of it when I was young, I learned the system of a method of delight, and my whole thing is invitation. They said, 20 years ago, they said Zan's method is invitation, puts invitation in the world, leaves them out there. And which is an invitation to respond, not an assumption that I'm going to get something. So I can't remember the last time a woman ever kind of said something, man, you're a creep, or you're creeping me out, or I don't like you said that. I can't remember it. I really can't.
Of your students that come to Romania and hang out for a few weeks and so on, surely some of the guys will say, actually, Zan, this woman called me a creep. How should I deal with that?
Well, yeah, okay. Well, then, if it was really said by her, then you really need a lesson in life. Then you really need to take that to heart and try and try and resolve this, or try and understand it, or get some coaching around it, or some education around it, because it's not good. It's not good. I've turned away guys in my coaching because they disagree with my approach. They think that they need to be more aggressive. Women don't know what they want, and they will succumb to your superior knowledge of the human relationships, and your, not aggression, they wouldn't call it aggression, but your confidence. They'll succumb to your confidence and be submissive to you, and you win. And it's just an anathema to the philosophy of Ars Amrata, which is imitation and beauty and treasure hunting. So if a guy came to me and said, listen, this girl called me a creep, I would really put his feet to the fire and say, that's not a good thing. You can't have that. You cannot have that going forward. You have to resolve this. And I can work with you to resolve that. No problem. Let's examine it. You give me all the details of what happened, how, and I'll tell you how you're showing up. I'll tell you why women are metaphorically leaning into you, or if they're not, they're metaphorically leaning away from you. There's something in your spirit and your energy that is creeping them out, and they're leaning away from you, and which is what she's saying. And that's not good, and it has to be corrected. And for guys that don't agree with that, or think, no, and the reason I'm saying this so strong is I just dealt with a guy recently that had that kind of feeling that no, it's I should be able to show my way or the highway sort of thing, right? Mm. And I'm like, yeah. So in other words, they're not trainable by me in my mind.
Yeah, it sounds like as soon as
because they're leaning towards that level 3 creepiness, which is anybody that would put secret cameras in a bathroom or something to watch someone undress. There's something about them pathological that I can't train. That's a therapy thing. Yeah. It's nothing I can do about it. It's not a coach. You can't coach a guy away from that.
It sounds like some men are starting to hit the 2nd degree creep, where the desire to look and continue to look starts manifesting in an action. It starts getting a bit more intense. And that's something you got to look at and correct. But there's also men at the very beginning where she might be like, oh, you're such a creep. And she kind of says it in jest almost. It's kind of true, but it's also in jest. And it's a good guy that would not go into this. He would be mortified if he ever actually did anything creepy. But the woman's like, God, you're such a creep. And in this case, he's got to pick up that she actually says that a little bit in jest and be like, you know what, I am creeping a little bit. Honestly, this is what I would say to you. You got to agree. You got to own it a little, and then find a delightful way to get out.
She could be really meaning
own what you want,
and you need a lesson, or she could be just saying it in jest to hope you keep approaching, or she could be just blatantly dishonest and trying to crush your soul, try to knock you down,
which is happening,
and say something that is not true. I'm offended that you said that. You're not really offended, but you act like you are, so that I walk away shrinking down. And that happens.
Yeah, a weaponized attack.
Weaponized attack on your psyche and your, yeah.
And this is it's a shame we put this so close to the end of the video, because it's a bigger concept, but this is where a man has got to really understand what he was doing, what his intentions are, and take a sense of he's got to defend his original good intentions, even if he can't do that with her or do that in a public place. He's got to be able to say, you know what, maybe I stared for a second too long, but actually there's no creepy intent inside of me, and this is a weaponized attack, and I'm not that. Basically, this is her malicious attack on my character, and I have something that in me that can defend myself.
And you're aware enough to know that I did not cause offense. I was not being creepy. She was just acting that way. So you can go away with, lightness in your steps.
And sometimes it takes a good friend, male or female, to be able to give you that reflection.
That's right.
Am I in the wrong here? Okay, it was her. Yeah. All right. So what I'll say in closing is maybe this episode puts more questions on the table in the viewer than it resolves. It's possible.
That's so in the future, man. It's interesting.
So if you have any direct questions about anything mentioned today, please put it in the comments below. And I think, as you can see, when it comes to working through this sense of fear, shame, hesitation, unclarity, that brings up a fear of relating to women because you're afraid of the consequences, Zan has a very practical angle on working with that. I have a bit more of a psychological angle of working through that. If you've got questions for either of us, reach out, get in contact.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
We'll be back soon. Subscribe, check out the membership, and thanks for your attention.
Thanks, Jordan.